1 minute. Counselors on Zoom, can you hear us? Yes. Okay, cool. Thanks. My little work session script is not on here. Okay, you guys good? You guys good? I would like to call to order this work session of the Forest Grove City Council. As a reminder to the public, there will be no public comment taken, and the council will take no formal action. At the 5:30 work session, we have downtown trees, Community Forestry Commission recommendations, and I'm going to turn it over to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, Dan Reardon, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department. And joining me this evening are several members from the Community Forestry Commission. To my left is Justin Marble, the Chair of the Forestry Commission, and member Bruce Countryman, and Vice Chair Mark Nakajima. And they're here in their capacity of advising City Council on tree-related issues within the city. And if there are any particular technical questions that come up, we have the experts here that can respond directly. So very thankful for them being here this evening. So I have a presentation I'd like to go through, hopefully fairly quickly, and then we can get into a discussion with the council about a direction to resolve some of the street tree issues downtown. So, thank you. The purpose of tonight's work session is to provide an opportunity for discussion about short and long-term solutions to street tree problems occurring in the downtown area. And there's a specific short-term approach that staff is bringing forward that we would like to move forward with. We'd like to ask the City Council's thoughts on that particular approach. Next slide, please. So the issue is that the downtown area includes enhanced streetscape that's not found in other parts of the city. And I'm sure you're all familiar with what the enhanced streetscape looks like. It includes the street trees, the tree grades, and the red decorative pavers within the primary downtown core area of Forest Grove. It includes several blocks, basically including Main Street, Pacific Avenue, 21st Avenue, Council Street, College Way, and the west side of Ash Street. And again, this enhanced streetscape is not found in any other part of the city. Installation of the enhanced streetscape started in the late 1990s. It began with a community development block grant, federal funds that included the installation of decorative streetlights, new sidewalks downtown, the brick pavers, the street trees, and the installation of 84 metal tree grates. But over the years, time has definitely taken its toll on the downtown streetscape. Next slide. This map just shows an illustration of where the enhanced streetscape is located downtown, and so the area, the block faces highlighted in yellow, are those block faces that include the street trees and the tree grates. Next slide, please. So the issue, I have several photos here, fairly recent, showing what the issues are. And this particular image was taken on Main Street at the corner of Main and Pacific Avenue. And you can see that in this particular image, the tree grate is definitely starting to lift. And there are also some issues with the decorative brick pavers in this particular location. Next slide. Another example of where the decorative pavers are starting to sink a bit, causing some tripping hazard issues with the tree grate and also the water meter cover as well. This particular location is also on Main Street. Next slide, please. Another Main Street photo. You can see where in this particular instance, the metal tree grate was cut out in a square shape, which is not the best approach since the tree grates are actually designed to be enlarged in a circular fashion as the tree matures and gets larger. I suspect that in this particular instance, the reason that the tree grate was cut out in a square fashion was to accommodate the electrical outlet for the tree lighting in this particular situation. So, but that's definitely not a best practice. This particular photo is on 21st Avenue. Again, it shows the tree grate lifting, also causing a potential tripping hazard. Slide. Then we have several examples also on Council Street. This is on Council Street near the Fry's Athletics store. This is a larger tree, but again, you can see where the tree grate is starting to lift and separating from the brick pavers, and again, another potential tripping hazard. Next slide. This is also on Council Street near 19th Avenue, near the accountant's office on Council Street, south of City Hall. You can actually see where the sidewalk panel was actually taken out and a new panel put in with the newer concretes. This particular photo really doesn't do the situation justice in terms of the magnitude of the problem, because there really is a large degree of separation between the tree grate and the sidewalk. And you can't really tell from this image clearly, but there is a large rock that's been placed on top of the tree grate to kind of help hold it down some. So definitely not a good situation. Slide. So an assessment was done. The city hired an arborist, a professional arborist, to prepare an assessment of the downtown street trees. And the assessment found that 24 trees were causing conflicts with the streets, sidewalk, or parking lot clearance, and the trees require pruning. Several of the trees are actually, the canopies are quite large and starting to cause conflict with the building, growing towards the building, and they really do need to be pruned back. 8 trees were noted as having recent cuts to the roots or the tree base, and or there was damage as a result of the surrounding tree grates, where the tree was actually causing the tree grate was actually causing cuts into the tree or tree girdling. Public Works recently attended to the grates to prevent further damage as best they could. Several of the grates have been removed over the last couple of years. 4 trees were identified as needing upper crown and or structural pruning, and 30 trees were affected by the compacted soils, resulting in exposed or girdled roots. And that tends to be a problem with street trees or trees in an urban environment where you have compacted soils. So that's definitely a problem. Next slide, please. So earlier this year, several members of the Community Forestry Commission, Bruce and Justin in particular, went out and did a further evaluation of the trees downtown. And they identified 56 locations where consideration should be given to removing the tree grates because of lifting and potential for tripping hazards. 20 trees that should be removed and possibly new trees replanted in those locations. Although the Forestry Commission did have some discussion about whether or not it makes sense to replace trees in all locations, and perhaps if trees are not replanted, using those locations for other purposes, such as perhaps installation, public art, putting in some art plinths or something like that to liven the downtown streetscape. 13 trees were identified as in need of pruning for sidewalk clearance and to address vision clearance issues at street intersections and with signs in the right of way. Next slide, please. So this map is from the inventory that the Forestry Commission did, and the purple color on the map shows locations where the tree grate should be removed, replaced, and the sidewalk should be fixed if needed. The green check marks indicate trees where there's pruning that should be done. The blue check marks show where the tree should be removed and consideration given to replanting. And as you can see, a lot of those trees are up along Main Street between Pacific Avenue and 21st Avenue. There are also a few on Ash Street as well. Should be looked at further. And then the CFC is looking at locations to remove the tree and not replacing them, but they still need to do more work on those precise locations, so those don't show up on the map per se. Next slide, please. So shifting into the requirements by city code, who's responsible for long-term tree maintenance and care? The city's code of ordinances and the development code both place the burden on the property owners adjacent to the sidewalk, adjacent to the public right of way for the upkeep of the sidewalk and the street tree. This requirement applies citywide, regardless of the location, and it applies to the enhanced streetscape area, where the city actually went in and installed the enhanced streetscape. It wasn't the business owners or the adjacent property owners that installed the enhanced streetscape or the street trees. But yet they're still responsible for the maintenance of those trees because of the requirements for the city code. Again, this is the same requirement that applies to the residential neighborhoods where street trees are planted as a condition of the development approval. Many of the downtown property owners have had trouble keeping up with maintenance, and the number of requests for tree removal have increased pretty significantly in the last few years, where business owners would like to have trees removed or the city to come out and actually prune the trees, take care of the tree. The city budgeted funds a couple of years ago to hire a contractor to go out and do that work. That was back in 2023. The city released an RFP, actually a request for qualifications, an RFQ for on-call services for tree pruning and removal, also taking out the tree grates and then replanting trees as needed. So actually sourcing the trees and then replanting the trees. Unfortunately, we didn't find any contractors that were interested in doing that complete comprehensive scope of services. Landscaping firms tend not to necessarily do all of this work, and I think that's why we didn't get interest in the on-call services. Plus it being on-call, I think that was also. So, but the lack of upkeep of the downtown streetscape has definitely resulted in safety problems, as you saw from the pictures. And there have been several instances where pedestrians have tripped and several people have been injured, and we've had some recent occurrences, and so something really does need to be done to take care of the issue. And due to the severity of the issue and the need to do something, staff has identified a short-term approach that we're recommending to take care of the most pressing problems. Next slide. So the short-term approach, it's really triage to resolve the most urgent street tree issues. And it includes removing the 20 trees identified by the Community Forestry Commission for removal, pruning the 13 trees identified by the CFC to take care of the sidewalk clearance issues and remove the visual obstructions, fixing the enhanced streetscape in the highly compromised areas, so taking care of the decorative brick pavers, replacing the sidewalk panels if needed, and then removing all of the tree grates at this point, especially those that are lifted. There are approximately 56. And then filling the planting area with a low-cost maintenance option, pea gravel, to provide an aesthetic appearance and to reduce weed growth and reduce soil erosion. This would be a temporary situation until it can be identified whether trees should be replanted or the location repurposed, or whether or not tree grates should go back in. There's some disagreements about whether or not tree grates is a best management approach. They do cause some issues, and so there isn't consensus whether or not tree grates should actually even be used within an urban environment. So staff estimates that the cost to complete the short-term approach is approximately $25,000 to $35,000, and this would include tree removal, stump grinding where necessary, minor sidewalk repair, filling the planting area with pea gravel, and then the tree. So the long-term approach would take the next step, and it would be looking at specifically on ways to address the ongoing street tree management issue. Try to find a solution to why the street trees aren't being maintained downtown. Suggested as follow-up to the short-term approach would include community engagement, and the long-term approach would specifically identify property owner and city responsibilities for street care, if any, if there is any city responsibility in the downtown enhanced streetscape area. If the responsibility changes in terms of what the expectations are for the adjacent property owners, it would require amending the city's development code and possibly the code of ordinances as well. And then based on established responsibilities for the street tree care, there is a city responsibility involved. Budgeting funds for downtown street be a follow-up item as well. Actually budgeting for the downtown street tree program. Other considerations for discussion include installing plinths for arts and select locations where trees are not replanted, installing streetscape lighting and other streetscape elements, street furniture, if you will, trash cans and benches in the downtown. And then also following up on recommendations from the Festival Street project pertaining to street trees, including updating the city's suggested tree planting list to remove trees with high allergy potential and to minimize tree care costs. Festival Street consultant recommended they specifically looked at tree varieties and emphasized tree types that don't have create a lot of pollen and allergy issues. Kind of a unique approach. And then establishing a funding mechanism for tree care. That was a recommendation from the Festival Street project. And then finally, requiring engineered soils or enhanced soils when new trees are planted to ensure uncompacted soil is available for tree root growth. So it's really important so that the roots don't cause as many problems. So discussion items for the council. The first question is there a consensus from council on the short-term approach, directing staff to move forward with the short-term triage approach? And also, this is an opportunity for council discussion on replacement of the street trees, whether streetscape lighting should happen, whether the idea of installing plinths for art is something to follow up on, and then also other streetscape elements, benches, trash cans, and the like. Staff is also interested in hearing council's thoughts on maintenance responsibilities. Does city council see a role for the city in maintaining the street trees downtown long-term? And then, depending on city council's discussion, is there a consensus to allow staff to work with the CFC to comprise a draft plan for city council consideration and public comment that addresses these issues within the downtown streetscape? So this concludes the formal staff presentation part of the work session. Be happy to answer any questions and open it up for discussion.
Okay, so let's start with questions before we go through the discussion items. Council President Rippey?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Dan, for the presentation. I have a couple questions. First of all, are you aware of any lawsuits or anything due to the injury?
I'm not aware of any lawsuits that have been filed.
Okay.
If there are any, it would go to Paul.
We've had a couple of people call about tripping, and we've referred them back to the property owner, whose responsibility it is.
So the liability for the grates, does that reside with the city or with the property owner?
It's any improvement in those sidewalks or responsibility of the property owner to maintain right now, which is why we've referred anybody that's called us back to the business owner.
Second question, what's your opinion about any benefit to keeping the pavers? I understand they were done many years ago, but as we can see, some of them are falling apart. Is the intent to replace the pavers or simply to try and raise them back up to the level that they were at, or what?
So at this point, the intent is to level them up, replace them if any need to be replaced, at least at this point. It's part of the short-term approach. Certainly whether or not pavers should remain downtown is something that can be looked at as part of the longer-term approach, as part of the broader streetscape, what the vision is for the streetscape downtown.
Okay, and lastly, you categorize the part of working on the city code as part of the long-term solution. Is there any reason why that can't be done concurrently with the short-term, or get that started sooner? Because I think there's going to need to be some changes with regard to the code.
That's a good question, Councilor Rippey. And I think really the reason it's in the long-term approach is so that we can have a discussion with the adjacent property. Because I don't think all of them understand or know that it is the city code requirement that they're supposed to maintain the streetscape. And then, just so that there is opportunity to have good discussion and then specifically lay out what the responsibility should be. Either it's all still on the adjacent property owners or shared responsibility. And then that gets into a discussion about budget and how it gets funded. And so that's a longer term discussion.
So in general, I would say that I'm in support of the short-term approach, although I do think the policy part of it, the code part of it, can be started relatively quickly, even though you're going to get input and all that thing. But I wouldn't wait until short-term is done before you even start that aspect of it.
Yeah, we can start that.
And then I really would like for you to look at the costs associated with the responsibility of the maintenance changing from the business owner to the city for those properties that are in that designated yellow area, the streetscape. I'm not sure that the owners, I'd just be curious. I'm not sure the owners had a choice to begin with, put those trees in. And if you'd ask them how many want the trees there versus paying for them to be, they'd probably be quite a few trees taken down. So I would not want to see that. I wouldn't want to see the trees go away. But it does need to be maintained, and I see that there needs to be a plan that has regular maintenance, not waiting 20 years before we realize that something needs to be done. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gustafson?
Sorry, I had to take myself off of mute there. Thank you. I agree with Councillor Rippey on we need to address that short-term approach right away before there's any serious liability that either the city or the business owners need to be involved in. So that should be taken care of as soon as possible. As far as the locations, that the yellow section and kind of the continuity of the downtown, it feels very confusing because on one hand, it's probably, in the code says that the property owner is responsible for that area, but at the same time, the property owner, it seems like they have no control over that area. And it's really the same with as homeowners as well. Those trees are put out in front of our house, whether we want it or not, and we're still responsible for them. So in that downtown area specifically, especially since we're trying to move forward with a kind of a look and feel in the heart of downtown, I would be supportive of changing that responsibility to a city responsibility, so that there is some continuity on look, feel, style, and maintenance.
Thank you. Excuse me, Councillor Ewing.
Thanks for coming this evening and presenting this information. So I do know that a case went forward, and I know this is New York, but regardless, it went forward that once those areas of danger are identified, then it becomes community welfare and safety, and the cities could be liable for it. So I'd like a more detailed look legally at what our liabilities, since we've now got photos of danger areas, if that liability doesn't come back to bite us. So I do have a concern about that. I totally agree with my other two counselors. I think we need to do the short term, get that moving forward. I would like to see the code, parallel to it, so we're not wasting time. As far as the streets lighting, I guess that we need to kind of, as a council, in my opinion, make a decision about a value statement. We want people to come to our downtown area. We want it to feel like Forest Grove. We want it to be representative of Tree City, those types of things. If that's a value for us to have better economics and better downtown, then I really think we need to consider it being a responsibility from the city in maintaining, keeping continuity, and keeping our downtown streetscape healthy. That's just kind of my opinion at this point in time. I would like to know with the grates, I know this was a big conversation when they first started going in. And it appears to me that the voices that knew said these grates are going to be a problem, not today, but in the future. I don't know why we have the grates anymore. I don't know why we don't just get rid of them and put something there that really keeps the health of those trees intact. Also, we talked a little bit about the bricks being disruptive and possibly a tripping hazard. And while we've talked about the trees, I don't see a plan on how we're going to address and deal with those bricks kind of slipping. Is there a plan for that? And if not, then we need to come up with one as part of your possible draft that you're going to put before us in the coming, hopefully, months. That's kind of it. If you feel that you can address any of those, I'd really be appreciative.
Thank you, Councilor Ewing. So we don't have a plan for the bricks at this point. We've been just focusing on the urgent issues of trying to resolve the pressing safety issues. Right now, the decorative pavers are part of the downtown streetscape, and so if there is a situation where because of the bricks sinking, if it's a safety issue, then we would need to take care of it and then make it look good, and so replacing the bricks where needed. Whether that's part of a long-term approach, there's certainly room for discussion on that. And it could be part of a broader discussion about just the streetscape generally downtown and other desirable elements that City Council would like to see to improve the downtown area.
Councillor Valenzuela.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thank you for the presentation. I will agree that this is, there are a lot of issues that could present a liability for the city. So we need to take care of that, I would say, first thing. I agree with Councillor Ewing that we need to think about the value. What do we want people to see when they come to our downtown? And the community is not very happy with the recent cutting of trees. Of course, there was the emerald ash borer and all that, and those trees are going to be replaced. So I would not like to see trees not being replaced. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I think we need to try to keep that and, do whatever we can to keep our trees, but make it safe. And I do think that it has to be responsibility of the city. I know that costs us money, but, we are responsible for that. And, we need to be in charge of the maintenance. That's my thought. Thank you.
You have a question?
Well, I have a comment.
Okay. Councillor Martinez.
And I agree with most of the statements that have been made so far. I know I have never seen a tree, not saying that there isn't, that doesn't cause destruction to the sidewalks or the scape around there. And if this is going to be a ongoing problem, even when we replace the trees, is it really worth it? And what other, and I know our tree experts know, and that we just need to come up with some way of preventing the destruction of that and the cost for the city or business owners in the future.
So I had two questions. Excuse me. First of all, how does the short-term approach align with the forestry's work plan and our master plan? And then also, as far as like our urban canopy, I understand that you don't want to have maintenance, but I also understand that part of the charm of our downtown and what's good for our environment is to have those trees. And so I'm just wondering if the commission had a chance, like what I didn't see in this presentation and hopefully in the long-term plan we come up with is also that layered approach of how we're meeting the climate needs, our urban canopy, and, you know, aligning with our master plan.
So thank you, Mayor Wenzel. I appreciate that comment because one thing, and kind of foreshadowing an upcoming work session, I think on July 8th, we're going to be bringing forward information about the climate-friendly and equitable communities work that needs to be done and code amendments. And downtown Forest Grove is designated as a town center in the Metro Region 2040 plan. And by virtue of being a town center, it's considered to be a pedestrian-oriented, climate-friendly area. And the climate-friendly and equitable communities rules there are requirements for maintaining tree canopy within climate-friendly areas. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be street trees. There are other ways that maybe you can reach those canopy goals by working with private property owners to plant trees downtown with and so forth. It doesn't have to be within the public right away, but there are some goals around that. So that's something that definitely needs to be taken care of. In terms of the urban forest management plan, and Bruce is really the lead author on the urban forest management plan, but there are recommendations in there about dealing with tree hazards in particular. And so this is something that aligns well with the urban forestry management.
Okay, thank you. What do you think, Councilor?
I'm on board with what everybody's saying. We also have to look at not only the bottom halves of the trees, but top halves. I sent Jesse a picture the other day. The tree in front of my restaurant snapped in half, took off my gutter, and it was a very light wind. It wasn't much wind, so it's not necessarily. I don't feel like we don't need trees. I feel like we need the right trees. Something that isn't going to grow up as high, have the root that goes like that. So I think that's the biggest thing is finding the right trees for downtown. So.
And there is information about tree variety and what the minimum required tree planting space is. So maybe going with a shorter stature tree rather than the larger trees. I know that the maple trees in particular are our favorite because of the fall color and so forth. And I think, and Mark was here when a lot of that work was being done, and I think maples were emphasized. But maybe now, moving forward, knowing what we now know, maybe looking at other varieties that are lower maintenance and are well suited for the planting space that we have.
One other, sorry, go ahead, Councilor.
One more question. In other places, I have seen large cement planters that are placed. Instead of planting them in the ground, you use these large planters. I'd hope you would consider that as well. That might solve some of the issues. Thank you.
At the commission's meeting last.
Yeah, which I remembered I had a question during the presentation. You didn't have the red marks on there of locations where you didn't think replanting should occur, but like guesstimate wise, how many of those trees did you think should not be replanted? Just a handful, I heard Justin. Okay. Well, one of the things I was wondering, so for me personally, I heard consensus, and I'll just double check about the short-term approach, approval from the council on that. With the other items, me personally, an idea I have is I think these are a lot of like really meaty topics, and I think that it will, the City Club just became affiliated Main Street Right program, and then you have the Forestry Commission, you have downtown businesses. So we had made some adjustments to our board and the commission to give capacity for like task force right? And I think that this is a perfect opportunity to start to have one on the street tree in downtown. Because I think, and we had right now, my understanding from Jesse is that on the Senate side, They approved some congressional funding for the Festival Street. That still isn't a final deal, but if we're going to start working on the Festival Street, they all just really overlap, and I don't want to have like one approach steering this. And so I think inviting a member of CCE, some forestry, Main Street program, downtown business owners, to look at this and work on it is the best approach, because I don't feel like, honestly, at this point in the game, that these are the questions that rich discussion, right, is going to come up with, those policy and those driving about maintenance responsibility, what we're going to do in the downtown. And we can discuss it now and maybe give some direction for the task force, but I wouldn't feel confident. I think there's a lot of work that needs to take place for the long-term approach, is basically what I'm saying. I don't know, anyone else on council want to weigh in? Oh.
So
Mr.
Mayor,
Cole.
in response to your last comment, I think that you have a lot of good points, and I think what we're looking for is to sort of, at this point, if council could give us give staff the sort of leeway to come up with the sort of just a very draft conceptual plan for what we might do with the trees and other things like we talked about before, like streetscape lighting, plinths, benches, those sorts of things. And then kind of have a conceptual plan to take out to the community, like business owners, CFC members, those sorts of people in the community. We think that we might get a lot more traction that way than kind of starting from scratch with everybody on the committee. But of course, that's the council's direction, or at the council's direction. But that's kind of what we were looking for tonight, was to see if council is comfortable with staff beginning that study and kind of working through that.
Okay, so to recap, the discussion item on is whether council is comfortable with staff coming up with a draft form, a framework, out dealing with some of these items, and then bringing them back. So how does council feel about that? I'm looking online, thumbs up, thumbs up.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, there's Councilor Ewing. You're on mute, Councilor. Councilor Ewing, you're on mute.
Thanks. So when we're saying that, are we also directing staff to begin or the short-term approach, and then staff to go forward with doing a draft plan? Because I really want us to kind of step into the short term, which is more because it's critical, and work in conjunction or parallel with a draft plan.
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing, or?
Yes, that's my understanding, is that there's consensus for staff to carry out the short-term approach while working on the draft plan for these other items.
Okay, that's good with me. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any further discussion from council? Questions? Yes, Ms. Reardon.
Mention one thing. It's the comments. I think it was Councilor Valenzuela mentioned about the Emerald Ash Borer and replanting. And just for the record, we've been working with the Oregon Department of Agriculture and the Oregon Department of Forestry on the removal of the ash trees. And both the Oregon Department of Agriculture and the Department of Forestry are looking and trying to find secure funds for replanting, but they haven't found funds yet. So I just want the expectations clear about what.
Tempering those expectations. Got it.
So that's still.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further hands, I'm going to close this work session at 6:08. Thank you, gentlemen. So, this work session of the City Council, the topic is City Charter, Process, and Ballot. Just another friendly reminder that there will be no public comment will be taken, and the council will take no formal action. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Downey.
Okay, we can bring up the screen share. Some of this first part will be review and a recap, and well, most of it's a review and a recap. So, for the next slide, purpose, review referendum and ballot process, and final review of ballot and charter language. You've held 3 work sessions on this topic since the Charter Review Committee turned it back over to you. And you requested a work session on the ballot process, which is tonight, and the last opportunity to comment on ballot statement and charter changes prior to our July 8th meeting, when staff will bring back a resolution for council consideration to refer the charter to the voters. The referendum and ballot process here is July 8th, 2024. Again, we're going to ask council to approve of referring the charter to the voters and approve the ballot title, summary, and explanatory measures. This is your last opportunity to make changes prior to the August 16th filing deadline, since your next meeting, your meeting in August is, I believe, is the 28th. And again, August 16th is the deadline to file the referral text and or prepared ballot title in order to complete the challenge period. And September 5th, deadline for filing to Washington County of a measure and election and explanatory statement. The county will then assign a ballot measure number. September 9th is deadlines to file measurement arguments for the voters' pamphlets, and November 5th is the election. And we do not pay for ballot measure contests, and there's no limit to the number of ballot measures that can be referred in a given election. Outreach process. Elected officials may, once the council approves the measure, elected officials may advocate for the measure at any time. Once you pass the resolution, no public employee work time may be used to distribute any material that advocates a political position on the measure. Staff can give informational only. And the city has a website page regarding the charter. If the resolution passes, it will be updated.
Paul, excuse me. Could you go back?
Yes.
Well, before we move forward, I need a clarification. Will that instruction also be given to boards and commissions? Because there is a question about what
Yes.
rules need to be applied to boards and commissions if they're used to engage in this.
Yeah. We can pass that information along to the boards and commissions, and we typically do that when the city's going to put a ballot measure on. We remind the boards and commissions members that they are public officials, they are not elected officials, so they cannot advocate for a ballot measure as a member of the committee. They can do it on their personal time as long as they're not representing the committee in any form or fashion. Okay, and we'll update the website to include educational materials regarding the specific ballot title and changes, explanatory statement, a question and answer regarding each proposed change, and we'll put a scrolling web banner highlighting the issue so residents can find it faster on the website. And we'll also, with use our communications staff to do social media posts on Facebook, Nextdoor, Instagram, highlighting the issue from an informational standpoint. Okay, the charter changes recap. The council charged the committee to review 4 specific issues: geographic representation, i.e. district or wards, and there was no change recommended there. Term limits for the mayor and city council members, recommended no change. Role of the mayor and council president. The role of the mayor changed to word as, instead of the political head of the city government, to the mayor serves as the primary representative of the council for the city. And for the council president, the main change was not being able to serve more 2 consecutive years, but it's eligible to serve again after a 1-year break in service. City manager residency, a change so it says the city manager need not reside in the city. And ordinance, resolutions, and orders, the change there is make them available in writing for public prior to adoption. Filling vacancies, allowing the city councilors to fill vacant positions even if the number of remaining councilors falls below the charter's quorum and voting requirements. This way, the remaining city councilors can appoint new members, and it won't fall on the county commission to appoint new members to get the council back up to a quorum. And then also limit a councilor's term length only to the next general election rather than the remaining term of the vacating councilor. Reasons for vacancies, they're changed to add conviction of a misdemeanor or felony crime, and you agreed on a consensus to have 1 ballot measure. So next steps, comment on ballot process and outreach, and comment on charter changes, resolution with ballot title, summary, and explanatory statements. I know they're on an additional, I think they're on an additional attachment, so. I think this concludes this PowerPoint, I believe, is it? The next slide? Yeah. So this concludes the staff presentation. If you want us to bring up the resolution with ballot title, summary, and explanatory statement, we can. If you want to discuss
Let's
anything
do
on here
just-
before you go there, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you. I think we should have a discussion on this portion of the presentation, make sure there's no clarifying questions. And then we'll move on. Are there questions? Any discussion? Counselor Ewing,
You're on mute.
you're on mute again.
I believe it's in the next document that we were sent, but I want to bring it to the attention because I'm not comfortable. Again, there's the terminology of disabled being used when talking about a counselor vacancy spot. I would prefer we get away from the term disabled because, again, that is a different term for different people. I find it kind of insensitive. I would prefer language that said unavailable or something along that line. Will we be seeing that additional information?
Can you tell us which section you're speaking of so we can look at that, Counselor? What slide are you on?
I'm not, no, it's not in this presentation.
We haven't brought up the charter
Okay,
language
cool.
present.
Okay,
Can we
that's
wait
what
for
I,
We haven't brought that up.
Yeah.
Because
Thank you.
Mayor, you wanted to talk about anything in this particular presentation?
Counselor Gustafson, did you have your hand raised? And no. Okay, I think, just for discussion purposes, I think with our proposed changes, I'm just still concerned about the change in definition to mayor, and I'm going to say it again on public record. And I also, have been speaking to other mayors in Washington County, and I almost think too I think there's good intention with the role of the council president being every 2 years, and then not letting someone serve. But then the reality is that really to put that in our charter really limits what people can do, and people come to council and they have different time allowances. I can remember after my first term as a counselor, I went to a few different counselors. I'm not going to bring up all of their names, saying, hey, I think we should switch up our council president. And no one wanted to do it, right? I think myself and then the person who was doing it at the time, Counselor Johnson, who had been doing it for 12 to 16 years, were the only two who wanted to do it. So I guess I'm just always afraid of really narrowing a scope in a charter, which is a constitution, which is the constitution for the city, which is supposed to give frameworks and boundaries. But, again, I would say that with the council president, much like the mayor, right? Well, the council president is decided by the council. So if whoever the council is at that time is done with that person, then I would assume they would not vote or nominate that person to be on. So I just think that we're getting, in the role of the mayor, I just do think the mayor, whoever's elected, whether it's whoever, is the person elected by the citizens in Forest Grove to be the political head. And I would hate to see the role that Forest Grove has, be us diminishing our own mayor in our charter, that role. But so those are my comments on that. Is there any, I guess I can't make an amendment to change the council president, but those are some comments I've heard, is that I've even changed my position on term limits because I used to be all for term limits, but what I'm hearing throughout Washington County is when you limit things and you're having a hard time with secession or community engagement, then you're getting, right, it's creating there's always a catch, right? That's policy, it's messy. Councilor Ewing.
So regarding council president, I think that the discussion was clear and that we want our council president to be able to be cross-trained. We don't want just one person time after time after time. And you know this from experience that it doesn't allow other people to grow if all you do is reelect. And while, yes, I understand that people don't always want to step up to it, but I think that as long as we have that in there, more people will be willing to step up to that role, knowing that A, it is a shorter term period, but also more importantly, that we are cross training the whole council to be able to step into that important role when needed. So I'm happy with the language as it is. We probably will never agree on the mayor position change. But again, in this day and age, I find that having a political leader really is going against what I'm hearing from the community. The role hasn't changed. And it's not a referendum. And I know that this is hard. It's not a referendum on you, Melinda. It isn't. This is a referendum on the future, at looking at different things. And I know it probably maybe feels that way because we've been very ardent about this conversation. But really, I feel terrible if that's how you feel. This is about making a change that is constantly put before us now politically. Once you say that somebody is a political leader, there are people that are going to resent that come forward and show it in many different ways. So while we may not agree with it, I'm happy with the language that we've all agreed upon for many times now. Thank you.
Councillor Gustafson. You're on mute as well.
I'm using a new headset today, so I'm still trying to get used to it. The role of council president, if there is a concern that after the council president has served their president term that nobody else wants that position, can there be an exception in here so that we're not kind of stuck with no council president because nobody wants to take on that role?
You would have to write the ability to have the exception into the charter language. So the charter as proposed would not allow the council president
so that's
to serve more than 2 years.
So that's my question is instead of doing the role of the council president in the charter, which is very, I mean, it's our document, right? Maybe we can do it in our council rules. So that's why I wanted to ask staff. Could we say in our council rules that we would like to see cross-training succession, we would like council presidents, because then is it easier for us to make an exception or an amendment? Then, I mean, that was my question is I just think that idea of succession and cross-training and like how long we should do it should be in our rules.
I see Jesse is heading for the council rules, but probably the answer is yes, you could take it out of the charter and you could put it in as a council rule that the council president could not serve any more than 2 consecutive terms unless the council makes an exception at the end of those 2 years.
Yeah, I think it backs us into a hole. And I also think that the one thing that the community member and the livability survey and all the, I mean, like when we talk about what we hear from the community members is community members want term limits. So it's ironic to me that we are saying, hey, no, we're not going to term limit ourselves, but then we're going to term limit this position. It's like, hey, we're going to tell the community like, hey, we didn't add term limits on this ballot. We're not going to put it in our charter, but we're going to do this other term limit. I mean, if we're saying like, to me, it's a policy and a philosophy question. If we're saying we're not doing term limits because we don't have enough community engagement and we really just want to keep making sure we have people fill that role, then that same argument has to be true for that council president. And I think the council president, we have another work session later about council compensation, right? And one of the options is to pay the council president more. So that means like, hey, well, this person, I would assume the idea behind the budget committee members was that the person does a little bit more work than another counselor, right? So there's just, I think we're doing things to try to increase, but I just don't think you should also force someone on our commissions. We try to do this with the chair. We try to say, you can't be the chair for more than 2 years. And people just really don't like being told. And some people like to volunteer and do not want to be in a leadership role. I don't know. I would rather see it in the council rules. I guess that's what but I'm not hearing any.
I wanted to just make sure that we're not backing ourselves into a corner. And we have an alternative. And if this backs us into a corner, I think we should think about it.
Jesse, did you find any answers on that?
So what the charter currently says is that at the first meeting of each year, the council must elect a president from its membership. It doesn't talk anything about terms or lengths or anything like that. The council, it's up to the council. If you want to put something like that in the council rules, you can. If you want to put it in the charter, you can. But it can go in either location. I think Paul already mentioned if you do put it in the charter, it's more ironclad than if you put it in the rules. If you put it in the rules, the council has a bit more discretion about what they may or may not want to do. It takes a vote of the council. That's the difference between the charter and the council rules.
Councilor Ewing.
So I think that it has been well articulated, and I don't want to back us into a corner either. And I guess that what I fear is that all of that work, all of our discussions will be diluted down into council rules. And during my time on the council rules have really meant very little. They were a great little pretend document, but they were not followed. So if there is an assurance that this would be something that we actually will fulfill, I am okay with putting it into the council rules and not locking us in the charter.
So it's a work, I guess we just need consensus. Is there a consensus from this group? I see yes from Councilor Gustin, Valenzuela, Councilor Ewing say yes.
Consensus for what?
To switch the remove the council president term length from the charter with an understanding that we're going to address it in council rules.
Well, I guess I don't see. I think the argument, the logic that we're not recommending term limits for elected officials is the same as setting term limits for those that are appointed on boards and commissions, and term limits for council president. Those are two different, distinct types of term limits. One is for elected officials that are determined by the voters. The other is determined by the council for its own administrative purposes and the purpose of, as Councilor Ewing has said, the succession planning and education and experience for other members of the council. So I'm fine with the language as it is. I don't see the I don't think the logic holds to make the difference.
Okay, so I had a yes from Councilor Gustin, Valenzuela, Ewing, Martinez, and then Marshall would. Yeah. And I have a yes for Marshall. So the consensus is to remove the council president limits from the charter update.
Okay, we will bring back the information on July 8th with that
Just
change.
To follow up on what Councilor Ewing said, right now I've already talked to Jesse for our scheduling purposes. Like one of the things that, a new mayor might come in and do it differently, but that I've told him is that at the very first meeting after people are sworn in and elected, that I want a work session on council rules, because I feel like what you were saying, I want to make sure you know that I heard you, Councilor Ewing, and I've been here and seen it. Like that way people can, that council that's elected chooses their rules, their agreements, their understanding, and how they're moving forward. And everyone knows the rules, right? Like, so that's something that's already on the agenda. So if you want that before that, I don't know how far out we are on the calendar with the work session, but I agree that there has to be, the council rules have to be decided by the council that's been elected, and everyone has to be aware of them. So, okay, do you want to move, are we good to move on? Are there any further discussion points on this part of it? Okay, let's move on to the process, please.
Do you want the resolution or the?
I don't know what Paul wants.
Councilor Ewing has a specific comment. If we could go to that, if we can find, where was your reference, Councilor Ewing, to the specific on the disability reference that you wanted to talk about, so we can go to that language to make sure we get that covered, talked about? Oh, I see.
You're on mute, Counselor. Elena, sorry, Counselor Ewing, you're on mute.
My day, what can I say? I don't have the document there. Thank you. Thank you. That is the term that I'm having issue with. I don't think disability is the proper term. I think that disability connotes in people's minds somebody who has an actual physical or mental or whatever disability. I don't like the term. So I would prefer us to use a more accurate term, something like if a counselor is unavailable or something like that. I just find that the term disabled is offensive to me. Thank you. Thanks, Paul, for finding it.
It was Mariah, I think.
Mariah found it, so.
Oh, thank you, Mariah.
There's slightly different wording later. I can show.
Let's see what the slightly different is. Temporarily disabled from acting as man. So what is used with Family Medical Leave Act? When, I think, can we use language that's, I think there has to be some sort of language used during, Counselor Gusting.
Wouldn't it just be considered absent? I mean, if you're absent for really any reason, a long-term absence, whether it's FMLA, bereavement, an injury, an illness, it's just an absence from council for an extended period of time. I mean, this talks about, it doesn't even say how long, right? But there's times that one of us can't attend a meeting due to our vacation or an illness or, disability. It could be any reason. This is really vague.
Yeah, I think this
disability kind of shoehorns it into one thing when it really should be absence, and it should be a long-term absence, right? It shouldn't be just.
Yeah, I think this is like for, and I think staff should probably correct me, but this is if something like, I want to say something has happened, or like a medical leave, and you're going to be gone for an extended amount of time, and then you're like, so then we can fill that vacancy. I don't know, because
I understand. I do understand what the concept is. What I'm saying is, as a disabled person, I feel we're using the wrong term. I agree with Donna. An extended absence is perhaps a better way, because then it can encompass so much more. So it is the term itself that I have difficulty with. It connotes something totally different when you use the term disabled versus if you use extended leave of absence. Thank you.
I want to be Goldilocks, because I think it's somewhere in the middle, because I don't want to just say absence, because then can a counselor say like, hey, I'm going to go to my summer or my winter house in this other location for 6 months, and then you guys can just, according to your charter, I have an extended absence, just fill my spot for this long. Like, I think it should align with FMLA. But I understand what you're saying too, Counselor Ewing, with the language, but the absence has to be for a reason that something has prevented, a medical reason someone has prevented. In FMLA, it says disability leave.
So
Yeah.
But it's also,
Oh,
I am so sorry.
I'm going to go
Oh, wait.
Council President Rippey, and then I'll come back to you, Councilor Valenzuela.
I'm sorry, but I got on my phone, I went to the thesaurus and looked for other words. One other word that may work for us is incapacitation. I think that's what we're trying to describe here. Incapacitation, for any reason, whether it's an illness, whether it's any number of other things, they're incapacitated. They cannot fill the capacity of the council or the role. So that might be an acceptable alternative term.
Is it something that staff can look at and then come back at the July 8th meeting?
Yeah, we'll work with the city attorney.
Wait, sorry, I totally forgot. Councilor Valenzuela and then Councilor Gustafson. I'm sorry, Councilor Valenzuela.
Okay, thank you so much. No, I agree. The word disability needs to be changed. I was recently on family leave, and that could be for many reasons. You know, you need to be taking care of an ill relative or something like that. And this word just kind of, it's too narrow. It's too narrow. We need to make it a little bit broader, like Councilor Ewing was suggesting.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Gustafson.
Do we also need to add some sort of breadth of timeline? Because if, you know, I don't want it, somebody is incapacitated for during one meeting, you know, we don't want anyone else saying, well, we need to have somebody else fill them in, or 6 months. And where's the line? Where's the line that we're going to draw?
I think someplace else in the charter, it says if a counselor, Jesse's going to tell you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
So currently in the charter under section 31, if you look at section 31B2, it does talk about absence from the city for 30 days or from all council meetings within a 45-day period without council consent. So there is kind of, if the council does consent to it, then it can be longer. But if the council doesn't consent, then those are the time periods that have been put in place. Now that would declare the position vacant. So that's a little bit, in this particular one, I think this is not necessarily declaring it vacant, but saying somebody else could be appointed pending the determination of a vacancy. So I hope that helps.
Okay, any other, so do you want to go over, we addressed Councilor Ewing's, were you going to go over something about this part of it? Or?
We can get with Ashley and work on, if the council doesn't like the term, the disabled, and work on alternate language. To consider putting in there. I mean, each word's going to have a different meaning, so we can work with Ashley on proposed language when to change it. Remember, this is for this is a filling of vacancy, so it's
right.
So this is a, you know, D looks like it is designed to be if a counselor is unable to attend the meetings for a while, but you don't want to declare the position vacant, you can appoint a pro tem counselor in the interim. So it's not a true vacancy if you read 32D. It's if the counselor says, I have 4 or 5 months worth of surgery. I know you need to continue business. You might want to consider appointing a pro tem counselor for that period until I can return. I think that's what 32D is kind of somewhat designed for, is not a short-term absence, but a longer-term absence where the counselor may be able to come, where they need a break, but they can come back and serve and finish out and come back and serve as a counselor at a later date.
We would just want to make sure that it's not inconsistent with section 31.
Yeah.
So.
Councilor, no, never mind.
Because you still have to approve a longer absence as part of 31B2.
So I guess Councilor Ewing's hand is raised. You're like playing games with me, Councilor. I'm like, it's not.
Not trying. I'm just having a really super long day. Not trying to cause any issue here. I'm happy with staff going away and coming back with a better term. That was my main issue, is the terminology. But also, I do agree that I think that when you're talking long-term, as Donna mentioned, when you're talking long-term, I do believe that we have language that reflects what that means. So I really kind of like the term incapacitated or something along that line. But I think that and I appreciate that we're all kind of looking at it more sensitively about the term itself, not that we don't put rules around it, but the term itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I guess my question for staff is just when, this process of putting it on the ballot and then educating it, what's the message? Like, I thought I was going to see it in this presentation, so I didn't ask it in the last
And
one.
we can go back.
Because there's a lot of
There's
little.
a third presentation. There's a third thing, the resolution that's kind of got the explanatory statement in it. So maybe you can go the proposed explanatory statement.
Yeah, just, okay.
So if you look at the resolution itself here,
It also has the ballot title and the summary.
going down, keep going down to the,
And,
keep going a little farther.
Oh, here we
and,
go.
and just maybe a little more
Section
background
4.
about that.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I was going to say, just maybe a little more background. That's what would actually appear in the voter's pamphlet. And so any educational effort that staff would do on the website or social media would really key off of that.
Okay, that was my question, is that, because it just seems, even for me, that there's like a lot of cleanup, like language that we're doing and some smaller things. So there's like 6 things that were being addressed. I just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah, that's the question, and then there's the summary of it, and then there's the
So
explanatory statement, which gets into more of the detail of the changes that are up in the summary.
And just a little bit of background about the summary and the explanatory statement and the ballot title. Those are all word limited.
Yeah.
And so in Ashley's proposed language here, it's not plus because you have to be at least add or minus, but it's within 3 to 5 words on each one.
Yeah,
So if we add something, we need to take something out.
Yeah, the question's typically 10 words, a limit. The summary, if I remember correctly, is 175 words, and the explanatory statement, I believe, is 500 words. From all the ballot measures we've written in the past, that's always been the limits on those.
Okay, cool. Are there any other discussion items or questions for staff? Okay, staff, Paul, you have what you need from us?
Yes.
Cool.
Remove the term limits for the council president from the charter and work on language for section 32D of coming up with better language to replace disability.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to adjourn this work session of the Forest Grove City Council. We will reconvene for our city council meeting in 17 minutes. Thank you. Right, do you think I can see the Zoom to see if everyone's on there? Please, sorry for not using manners.
All right, everybody's there.
Okay. So, hang on, let me read my little work session script.
I'm gonna sit here.
I would like to call to order this work session of the Forest Grove City Council. No public comment will be taken, and the council will take no formal action. Tonight's work session topic is on council compensation, and I'm going to turn it over to Paul Downey, Assistant City Manager and Finance Director. Paul.
Good evening. With us tonight's David Anderson, the chair of the Budget Committee. He was also the chair of the Budget Subcommittee on Compensation. I'm going to go through some general slides, and then we're going to bring up the presentation that he's going to do about the committee and what they talked about, and their recommendation and their reasons for it. So we'll get started and so background, council compensation refer to the non-elected members of the Budget Committee by the full Budget Committee for further analysis. They held an additional Budget Committee meeting discussed council compensation on May 22nd, and also did an additional meeting on June 4th. They did 2 meetings.
Can you pause 1 minute? Councilor Valenzuela, I see your hand. Can you not see the screen or what's going on?
Are we muted? We might be muted. Hang on.
Jesse,
Okay, we're
thank you. Thank you, Councilor Valenzuela, for first
ready here now?
letting us know that we were muted.
All right.
Okay, we're now ready to move on. Unmuted. So see, everybody so far has been muted tonight. Okay, go ahead.
Share screen. Okay, we talked about that slide. And okay, the committee reviewed in detail an updated spreadsheet that listed councilor compensation and mayor compensation. When I say councilor compensation, I also mean councilor and mayor on that. Councilors and mayor. For 17 area cities of larger and smaller size, the committee discussed options for councilor compensation, and the committee discussed how to comply with Oregon revised statutes regarding how and when compensation for elected officials can be changed. The purpose of tonight's work session is to review the committee's recommendation and discuss councilor compensation. Work session is divided into 2 parts, councilor compensation and then 2, implementation. Part 1, councilor compensation. Current compensation's up there. The mayor receives $3,744 per year. Councilor receives $2,496. Mayor and councilors can elect up to family health coverage and pay 5% of the premiums. So the city pays the other 95%. Cost of the health insurance varies between councilors depending on the coverage they elect. There's no opt-out to provision to obtain a cash equivalent of the cost of the policy. Even if the city elected an opt-out provision, our contract with CIS limits the amount you can pay an individual to $100 per month. And so total compensation, total expenditure between health insurance and the stipends is about $146,000 per year. You see the bulk of that's for the health insurance. That's based on current coverages. So based on the comparison of 17 neighboring cities, small and larger size, 10 had a larger stipend for the mayor than the councilors. 2 cities had the same stipend for the mayor and the councilors. 5 cities had no stipend for either the mayor or the councilors. For those cities who had a larger compensation, a larger stipend for the mayor, the range was paid to the mayor was varied between 1.35 times to 10 times. Some of that has to do with the fact that, for example, Beaverton has a full-time mayor, so that's why that's the reason for that 10x on the compensation. Okay, other things consider: 11 cities did not pay a larger stipend for the council president than for other councilors. 2 cities paid a larger stipend for the council president than the other councilors. 5 cities did not pay a stipend at all to anybody. 13 cities do not pay for health insurance for either the mayor or the councilors. 4 cities pay for some health insurance. Of these, 1 is for the mayor only. 1 is full family for the mayor and employee only for councilors. And 2 are the same. The mayor and the councilors have the same coverage. Committee discussed various options, including leaving the health insurance the same and increasing stipends by the CPI. Leave health insurance the same and increase stipends by more than the CPI. Discontinue health insurance and allocate all or a portion of the cost savings to stipends. Or limit health insurance to the individual and allocate all or a portion of the cost savings to stipends. Additional insured would be at the member's expense. So briefly covering those examples. Example 1, status quo but increased by stipend by CPI. Health insurance would remain the same. The mayor's stipend would increase by about $150 per year, and the councilor stipend would increase by about $100 per year. That increases the total budget by $750 to about $146,750 per year. Example 2, discontinue health insurance and apply 100% of the existing budget to the stipend based on the existing stipend ratio for health for mayor and councilors. So again, the health insurance is discontinued. The mayor's stipend would go to $28,000 per year. Councilor stipend would increase to $18,700 per year. The budget would remain the same at $146,000 per year. And these are just examples that they use to discuss. So going on to the next example, discontinue health insurance and apply half of the existing budget to the stipend based on the existing stipend ratio for the mayors and the councilors. Health insurance is discontinued. The mayor's stipend would increase to $13,800 per year. Councilor stipend would increase to $9,200 per year. The overall budget would decrease to $73,000 per year. Example 4, provide mayor and councilors with employee-only health insurance coverage and apply the remaining budget to stipends using the existing stipend ratio for the mayor and the councilors. So health insurance would increase to employee only at the 95% the city pay. So the mayor and the councilor pay 5%. Anything above employee only would be paid in full by the mayor or the councilor. Mayor's stipend would increase to $14,250 per year. Councilor stipend would increase to $9,500 per year, and the budget would remain at $146,000 per year. At this point in time, we're going to bring up Dave Anderson's presentation that he put together to talk about what they did and their reasons for what their recommendation is, and then the reasons for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think we can go through this first pretty quickly because Paul already covered the process that we went through. The only thing I would add is that we did invite each of our elected officials to submit input to the subcommittee, and we appreciate that we received it, carefully studied and reviewed, and compiled along with the information on the comparison matrix that Paul. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So let's kind of focus on our rationale for wanting to make some changes. It was a very interesting and deliberative process that took quite a bit of discussion. The consensus emerged, though, that the current system didn't seem to meet the needs of the city as we understood them, as well as we wished they would. And particularly, we noted that a very heavy weight on health insurance is very valuable to some people and much less to others. Those who are self-employed or who are not receiving health insurance through employment or other means could receive a great deal of benefit from the health insurance. But if you have health insurance, either through Medicare or your employment or whatever, this may not be as attractive. The other thing we noted was that the dollar equivalent of the health benefit being provided was not necessarily proportional at all to the duties and responsibilities of the person involved. In fact, it was up to the individual elected official to decide whether to cover their entire family or just themselves or themselves and a spouse. And so that had a very, very large difference on the dollar cost of the benefit, but it was entirely something that the elected official could decide on their own. And this creates what we felt was insufficient transparency. Citizens wouldn't know necessarily how much dollar value of compensation is going to any elected official unless they understood exactly what the health benefits were, how many people were covered, what that cost, and that's usually not the kind of information that we make available to the public. So after quite a bit of discussion, we felt that some changes would be in order, and then we recommended these changes as shown on the next foil. So we thought that it would be good to change the subsidized health insurance to be elected official only with the option to purchase for family members. That we would also create 3 tiers of stipends, and that we would use the savings from not providing as much health insurance benefit to significantly increase the stipends. One of our rationales for increasing the stipends significantly was that we wanted serving our city in this manner to be recognized as a significant commitment that took a lot of time and effort, and we wanted it to be something that was viable for more people to consider doing. And so that led us to believe that a significantly larger stipend would probably increase the pool of people who might consider running for office. So our recommendations were that we offer a $12,000 per year stipend to the mayor, 9.5K for council president and 8K for the rest of the council members. That we would not change the other benefits that you currently receive. There was quite a bit of discussion about how to implement and when to implement. It's quite complicated. Our recommendation was that this take effect in January of next year, giving everyone time to prepare for this change. And we recognize that the mechanics of how to approve a compensation increase for people who are currently serving is fraught with areas to get things wrong. And so we felt that was not our expertise, and we didn't want to weigh in with any suggestions of exactly how the council would do that, but we would suggest that you rely on the staff council on if you decide to adjust the compensation, to do it with their guidance on how and when and through what manner of resolutions. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for David or staff? Councillor Ewing.
Hi, David. Thank you for coming this evening. My one primary question right now is, were any other options considered? Say, for instance, an expense account or a reimbursement account. And the reason I ask that is that, to me, when you put a flat salary out there, it does not provide transparency for what that salary is compensating the individual for. It doesn't really reflect to me transparency on how those tax dollars are being used. So before I get too detailed, was there any other consideration other than just to increase the stipend?
Absolutely. There was a lot of discussion held about possibly using different expense reimbursement mechanisms and things like that. The general view was that committee members felt that significant expenses that an elected official would incur as part of their official duties should be known a priori and approved by the council a priori, so that there's, again, transparency in what's going on. So if you're going to be going off for travel or training or other things that may incur a significant expense, we would assume that that would be something that would be discussed and approved at a council level and reimbursed accordingly. So the stipends that we're suggesting would be to cover the smaller issues that don't make it to the level of having to go through a council approval process, and, as I mentioned, to try and make this a viable option for a larger pool of people to consider serving the city in this way.
I would have appreciated, and perhaps as we go forward with this, I would have appreciated some information and comment on the discussion for the expense account option, other than just upping the stipend portion. Could we provide that in our next work session? Because I'd like to kind of understand both sides of it, as well as, to me, this is a huge, huge, huge increase. And our charter does not require us to go before the people for this type of compensation. And I have real concerns about rolling this out to the community without having had full discussions of other options that are available other than just a stipend. Is that something we could have in our future work session?
I don't know that there's a lot of additional detailed information that can be supplied about the specifics of the discussion. It was a free-flowing discussion lasting for hours, and detailed minutes of every point were not being kept. I will tell you that there was discussion about how much should be expensed versus stipend, but generally the feeling was that significant expense items should be carefully considered and approved by the council
To interrupt, like, do any other, let's ask staff, do any other municipalities offer this option that Councilor Ewing's saying? Instead of a stipend, doing an expense account? Did you see that in your
They didn't appear
comparables?
to in the schedule that we had. I mean, some of them had education, had travel, like for conferences, like for LOC and NLCs, similar to what we have.
Yeah.
Uh,
Councilor Gustafson.
Yeah, I agree with going to council to get those reimbursements approved ahead of time, obviously. But I'm just wondering too, and I agree with Councilor Ewing, this is a very big jump, and I'm not comfortable with it. Not that I don't think that elected officials work hard enough for this jump, right? The time that we spent, it's definitely appropriate. This big of a jump all at once is where I'm concerned. I'm just wondering, have we thought through a rolling increase? So an increase of a certain percentage each year until we hit the final goal for this raise.
So are we going to move, are we moving on to discussion right now about like what we're hearing?
We
or
have some more.
Do we have more
Have
presentation?
some more,
or
so we're going to
questions?
go back to the city.
Okay.
I believe this was Dave's last slide, so we'll go back to the city's presentation. Next slide, and go to the next slide because we've already discussed that. So part 2 would be implementation. And this would be this is for any increase, even if you wanted to increase it by your CPI increase. This is the process you'd have to go through. We probably didn't increase the CPI correctly last year, so we'd have to go through this process even if you just did a CPI increase.
But even with our current policy, where we do the increase yearly and it comes before,
Your
we're going to have
policy
to vote
says
like
you'll
this.
increase it by CPI, but
Yeah,
you have to go
okay.
to the council and pass a resolution. But we didn't probably pass the resolution correctly last year, so we'd have to go through these steps to pass that resolution, even if you gave yourself the 4% CPI that the non-rep got. So to avoid conflict of interest and abuse of office issues when the council is voting, the committee discussed the following 2 options. Have the increases go into effect at the end of each term. In this case, all councilors can vote after declaring a potential conflict of interest. However, there would be differential benefits for a 2-year period. For example, the people that start office January 1st, 2025 could get different benefits than those that started January 1st of 2027. Because they would be waiting to the end of the current terms for each councilor. Or 2, the option 2 is have the increase go into effect for all councilors at the same time. In this case, the council passes successive resolutions that allow councilors to recuse themselves for the resolution in which their compensation is discussed. And we talked with the city attorney. She has done this. She's done option 2 with numerous cities when they wanted the options to go into the compensation change to go into effect at the same time. It's a little cumbersome, but it gets you through the process. So next slide. So a couple questions that arose during the committee meetings. If the councilor health insurance is changed, does it have to apply to all councilors at once, or can the pool simultaneously have different benefits? We asked CIS, and the pool would be the city councilors as their own group, could have different benefits simultaneously. For example, if you had different cost percentages for those people in January 2025 versus January 2027, CIS doesn't care that you have different cost splits. We just collect it and send the full premium to them. So increases go into effect for some members, but not other members at the same time. Does it potentially violate the Oregon Equal Pay Act? According to the city attorney, possibly. It's never been challenged. It's never been worked. It's never been gone through on a case. And it will require the elected official to file an equal pay complaint and be successful. So the committee recommended all changes go into effect for all councilors at the same time. That'd be January 1st. This would require successive resolutions, a resolution to change the mayor's compensation in which the mayor recuses and the council votes, a resolution to change the councilors whose terms expire in 2026, in which case those councilors recuse and the mayor and the remaining councilors vote, and a resolution to change the councilors whose terms expire in 2024, in which case those councilors declare a perceived conflict of interest, and they can either vote or recuse themselves, and the remaining mayor and councilors vote. The reason on number 3 they only have to declare a perceived conflict of interest is they don't know for sure that they will be a city councilor as of January 1st, 2025, so there may not be an actual conflict of interest. Frequency of review, again, currently stipends can increase annually by the CPI if the council adopts a resolution each year. That resolution, as I previously said, would need to be passed using the same procedure as described on the previous slide. And if the council accepts the committee's recommendations to significantly increase the monthly stipends, the next question would be how often would that compensation be reviewed? The committee did not address this issue. Staff would probably recommend that council compensation be reviewed when the market study for non-represented employees is conducted every 3 years. That way you're not visiting this every year, if depending on what stipend you end up setting. So, before we discuss, it says discuss annotation, but we should go back and discuss the compensation first, because that'll be.
And I had a question about in the recommendation from the budget committee members who brought this forward. In the proposal you brought, is it a reduction in the city's budget or an increase in the city's budget?
Neither one.
You'll see if you
I think
adopt what they're recommending,
It decreases.
your expense decreases from 146 to probably to about 130,000 per year.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to just make a couple comments to some of the comments I heard. I think I appreciate the work. I know, I mean, I had HLB. You guys really discussed this multiple meetings, and this actually costs less money to the taxpayers. So when people are like, I can't do this, this is too much, it's basically reallocating funds. And so the counselor compensation, what I read from other cities and read, my thought process of doing this job, council compensation should help alleviate the pressure that's put on people to run for council. So I took 5 unpaid days this year. $500, no, 10 unpaid days, $500 a day. That was $5,000. There's no expense account to get that back, right? So that's why the council compensation. So childcare, when I first got elected, my son was 3, right? So when we go to our city's values, financial stewardship, this financially is a smart decision. Community engagement, listening to the budget committee, trying to say like, hey, we want to encourage people and make sure they are compensated so they can do the job. Equity, diversity, and inclusion. Putting value, letting people choose what they do with their compensation instead of saying, hey, we have $146,000 of value in health insurance that really only meets a few groups of people. And strategic long-term planning. Folks, people, I'm so worried. Like, you have to create policy to help adjust. I'm just afraid who is going to want to do the jobs we are doing. Like, I love it. I love our country. I love government, but it takes a certain amount of wealth and time to be able to do this. And this is not a huge increase. This is actually a decrease. It's just saying, hey, we're going to give you cash so you can choose. Do you need to buy into family health insurance? That's still an option. Do you need childcare? Are you driving your car a whole lot? Do you have to take time off work to go to this meeting? So to me, and I think, you are worried about this is totally a good time to bring it. It's an election cycle. The way you get public comment is you bring a resolution forward and you have a public hearing and you invite people to tell us. But to me, when I look at our city values and I look at the financially, that it's actually a smarter financial decision for the city, I can't see anything negative about moving to what the committee's recommendation was. Any other comments?
I have a couple questions.
Okay,
First of
Council
all,
President.
I'd asked, why did you decide to create a separate stipend for a council president?
Our understanding was that the council president has some additional responsibilities and duties that sometimes befall upon that person that are not ones that are common to the rest of the city council members.
Well, my understanding of the role, since I'm in it, the additional responsibilities only come when the mayor is absent from being not able to do that. And unless the mayor asks, then the council president is no different than any other councilor. And if you don't get asked in an entire year to do anything, then there's no justification for an additional amount of money for a council president. I just don't see that.
I think our thought process, Councilor Rippey, was that, first of all, it's likely that council president would be asked, never guaranteed, of course, but secondly, that person needs to be available and willing to do the job at any time that that's necessary. And so that's worthy of some extra consideration.
So thank you. The other comment I would have is that I'm still not comfortable with the transparency and the accountability of these recommendations. I certainly think that people should be compensated for the expenses that they incur. But providing a large stipend does not give the voters a transparency as to what those funds are being used for. The intent is that they be used for expenses incurred in the role as members or as elected officials. But there's no guarantee that that's the case. And without some mechanism of accountability, it's just uncomfortable to me to think that the taxpayers' money could be used for things other than actual city work.
Of course, it's used that way now with health insurance premiums.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what was offered. I'm not saying that's the right system.
I'm not saying it's right either. I'm saying it's the case that right now a citizen has no way of knowing
As
how
far
much
as
benefit.
transparency, I agree with you 100%.
Right?
I agree with you.
Yeah, we don't know. But if I know that as a council president you make X and as a councilor you make Y, for these dollar amounts, it doesn't seem to me critical that the breakdown of how that's going to be spent is necessarily something the public has a keen interest in. If we were talking, six-figure stipends, well, that may be a very different discussion, but we're talking about nobody's going to live off these stipends. All that you can expect is that they will probably be able to defer some of their expenses that they would otherwise have and be able to adjust their personal circumstances to allow them to serve. I think that was our thinking anyway, was that these weren't large enough dollars that you could look at them and say, I need to know how they're spending the $8,000. It's not that much.
There are other people in town would take exception to that, particularly the people that are on poverty and low income would take exception to that.
Could be.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's any scrutiny about how you're spending the stipend you have now?
What stipend?
The small stipend that you have now. It's small.
Yeah.
But is it scrutinized?
Is it scrutinized?
Yeah. Do you feel a need to explain how you're expending those funds to your constituents, the small funds that you do
I
receive.
explain it a lot, tell them a lot, exactly what I get and how I use it. It's asked a lot.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that we should still do that. I think that's our job as elected officials. Like, I would have no problem explaining, and I think too, through the public. Okay, so Councilor Ewing.
So I'm kind of old school in this respect. I don't feel that the taxpayers should have to fill in for my short-sightedness in not knowing the amount of work that will go into the job, and not knowing where my dollars that I get are going. I'm not comfortable with going from a volunteer position. And quite frankly, that is an empowerment, because every time a citizen comes up and says, I pay your salary, I explain to them, as Councillor Rippey does, exactly what I get. I'm empowered by the fact that I'm a volunteer, that I'm not paid to do this job. And it gives me that empowerment to know that the community is involved in any kind of financial increase that we're doing as a city. And I beg to differ. People will know that this is a large increase. People will come and resent that this is a large increase all in one shot, particularly in these economic struggling times. So to say that, well, it isn't that big, I promise you there are people in our community that are living and having to survive on that type of salary. So no, I don't buy that argument. I'm not happy with not putting this before the voters, not being transparent in it, and to say that, well, I'm just, as it stands now, I am not able to support this. I want to see more on reimbursements. I want to see more on accountability. And I certainly want to make sure that this would go before our city and our taxpayers before we make this type of kind of commitment that our community hasn't been involved in. And I'm not discouraging you, Dave, or the group that you worked with. I'm just not sure that the reality of the job is actually fully understood. And I'm sorry that somebody has to take their own time to be mayor, but this certainly was known. And I'm sorry that the contract that you work under doesn't allow you to take that time paid, but that's the reality of the job that we got elected for. So yeah, I have real problems with this at this point.
So a couple of things really quick before Councilor Gustin. When the council decided to make healthcare be their compensation, was that taken before the voters, and were you a member of this council?
I was not a member of this council. And as far as I know, because I was not a member of this council, the first I knew about it was after I was elected. And I was a bit shocked that there was no discussion.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Gustafson.
Yeah.
I have quite a bit to say about this as well, and have some questions that I want to pose to both Dave and the rest of the council.
Can you turn it up
So
a
I
little
think
bit?
we still have more.
Keep going. Sorry, I just couldn't hear you.
I think we have more conversation that we need to have here, but it is 9:30. It is late, and I move that we table the remainder of this conversation and the budget subcommittee report for another meeting.
Okay, so it is past our time. I just want to make one comment before we do this, but I just want to be really clear. I was fully aware of what I signed up when I ran for mayor. But I also feel that my job as a representative of this community is to make sure that we have policies that make it easier for people who are not privileged like me to do this job. I can handle the financial cost. I have parents who live by me who watch my kid, but that is not the case. And it is those members that have been underrepresented that I am standing here saying this is equitable. So I take a little bit, I mean, I'm trying not to take, but like there's no personal digs. I'm looking at this as policy. So I just want to be really clear. Okay, so we will bring this for another work session. Work session adjourned.
I made a. Great.